So, we are halfway through, and we're on chapter 7. And chapter 7, the Bemba proverb is fumubuchindika, umuini. And the translation in the book is, if you respect yourself, people will respect you. I thought I could dig in a little bit into ubufumu. So ubufumu, I couldn't actually like. This is where that direct translation is. It works for what it's supposed to be, but ubufumu is actually infumu is a king. Infumu in Bemba is a king. Fumu in Ngoni is a king. So when they say ubufumu, it really represents that being of like a king or a queen. Um, and so it's very, if you think of those roles of like a king, it's a
Yeah, like
very
royalty.
yeah, it's a very respected kind of position, but also kingness has an attribute itself, like how the
Oh.
kings hold themselves. It is very specific. And
Mm,
so, obviously, in the English translation, it loses the fact that it is about the respect that comes from being a king. And if you
mm,
think about kingdoms, queendoms, you have a lot of respect and status because of who you are, whether by
yeah.
blood or by appointment. So Owofumo is actually kingness, if you kind of like direct translation,
Mm,
and the Okuchintika is the respect. So in my head, if you think about it, it's like kingness respects itself. So if
yeah.
you're a king and you are a queen, you respect yourself, one, because the role itself needs you to respect yourself, but
Mm,
there's a certain respect that comes with those roles.
yeah.
And I think even in like day to day, when people are doing affirmations and holding yourself up, you know how people say, don't let your crown, something like put your head up, don't let your crown fall, or something like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
because there's something about the crown being on the top of your head and what you represent as the kingness of like your
Mm,
stature on
mm,
that. So that's kind of like the deep, I guess, a little bit more interpretation of that proverb. Even though in English we're saying if you respect yourself, people will respect you, that respect comes from kingness or queenness, because
yeah.
the Bemba proverb is ubufumo, which is a king or a queen. And
Yeah.
so if you think about that respect, even kings and queens who are not respected, right, where they think your character is crap, people are still going to give you the
Yeah.
honor
Yeah.
of like, you are the king, or that king is a drunk, ha 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 ha. But when they see you, they'll give you that respect.
Mm,
So for me, it kind of like, when it touches on that, it's more about all of us expressing that kingness, that queenness in
mm,
ourselves. If you don't show that to yourself, how can you expect other people to then give you that respect as well?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Um,
so rich.
yes. Yes. And this is why I've loved some of these conversations, because I've kind of had to think about the words themselves, because sometimes when you try and translate something into English, you 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 lose the uniqueness of what each word is
Mm, mm,
in there. Whereas like now I can explain a little bit about Owofumu is actually like the king or the queen is called Infumu. So it comes from that type of respect,
yeah.
where you're respecting the kingness and queenness in yourself.
Mm. It's
Yeah.
almost like almost a divinity of some kind, like some
Mm.
divine, like your divine nature in a way. And you have to, like, that's what it's reminding me of, like like in Christianity, right? You
Hmm.
have to see, yeah, there's the concept of agape love,
Yeah.
and where you're meant to see the best version of the other
Yeah.
before before it has manifested. It's kind of like in the same spirit of like you're meant to appreciate and acknowledge their divine nature. It's like not what they're presenting as right now, but it's more like that higher, more refined
Yeah.
version of them, and that's what you're meant to try and connect with. And I think even in our own way, it's kind of like what you're saying. Like in Bemba culture, this has already been
Yeah.
acknowledged in its
Yes.
own way, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's in net, like especially if you think about like royalty through blood or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's in you. And so I liked how they've also kind of put it, because if you think about, royal lineages and all of that, their blood kind of like relations. So if you're not a blood, you're not a royal
Mm.
type of thing, and hopefully your royal blood doesn't get killed and the new one comes in. But they've actually translated it more to kind of like all of you have
Yeah.
this in you. So if
Mm.
you don't see it in yourself, how are you going to expect others to give you that same feel? So it's
Yeah.
innate to you. Like it's not something anyone else can take away. But
Yeah.
if you don't acknowledge it first, how do you expect others to acknowledge it of you?
Of you, yeah, because you can't. What is it they say? You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So if you can't even see it in yourself, then definitely you're not gonna give others. But then they also won't give it to you. Like they won't give you that respect. That and it's interesting that we touch on that because like I don't know if you hear this and like for me as someone who goes and meets up with other men, especially married men, you hear them say this sometimes. We're like, I don't feel like I'm being respected, and always the question that comes up goes like, I get that, I get the feeling,
yeah.
but do you wonder why? Right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, like let's dig deeper into this. Pull up a chair.
Yeah.
As you're projecting it, have you figured out what uh, your
No,
own
but
thing is here? Yeah,
yeah, but people don't want to talk about
yeah,
that side, right? They
yeah,
don't go, I want what I want, right? Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
deserve this. It
Exactly.
should be given to me. It's like
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Because
Should
it's easier as well, right? It's easier for me to be like, you are disrespecting me,
Mm,
than kind of like think about like, what am I doing to add to this disrespect?
yeah. Yeah, it's like like
Yeah.
how do you even like which goes back like how do you even respect yourself you
Mm,
know in what ways, like in or maybe in others, how do you disrespect yourself, right? Like
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so for me that comes to mind and you go like, oh wow, you'll hear a lot, like especially like in the work circles, like in the areas we work. you One thing I learned of late was to not how do I put it, like do not um compromise yourself, right?
Mm,
Because it comes back, like every time you compromise yourself, then that sort of builds up some sort of resentment, which can compound over time and eventually like it will explode in some weird dramatic way
yes.
that you feel like you had to you get that strong sense of you haven't been allowed to express yourself, and now you're going to express yourself in such a very strong way just because you feel you haven't been allowed in a long time, yet actually you contributed to not expressing yourself, and
Yeah.
now that expression has built up to the point where you can't hold it back and it has to come out.
And it's gonna blow up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you touch on something. I think about like respect also comes in many different forms and many different ways. I chose in the story, in the Mchalo stories that specifically for this chapter, I chose language. as a
Mm.
form of respect,
Mm.
or the concept of like language and how we appreciate, especially our mother tongues. And also, this is in comparison to, for example, English and how much respect we give the Queen's language. And you have
Yeah.
to say it right, you have to pronounce it right. This means this, and you have to be exact. And sometimes we forget to give our mother tongues the same respect.
Oh, we
We
don't
don't
respect
even,
them.
right? Like,
Because you remind me, like, growing up in primary school in Uganda, going to school, I don't know if it still happens now, but there was a lot of you'd say enforcement around English, right? If
mhm.
there were punishments, all these you know ways to expose people who are not speaking good English, and
Yes,
calling out the local languages. Oh, you've been speaking vernacular.
yes.
You're not speaking you're not speaking English, and that's not good for you. You don't When you come to school, you're supposed to say it in, speak in proper English, say everything in proper English, and speak it as perfectly as you can, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you move overseas, and they're like, sorry, what? You need to do an English test.
Yes. I feel
But
like, do
I
you
was
know
so
how
good.
many years?
I was so good at this. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And you bring something to mind. I had a friend of mine who was also a housemate at some point, and ages ago when they used to do, I think, like you could do like language tests, and if you had like a language, for example, that was quite needed in the country, then they could give you some extra points in there. So obviously things like Mandarin and stuff were there. Swahili used to be there.
Mm.
And I remember my housemate had grown up Tanzania. She speaks Swahili, and when we found out Swahili was there, I was like, dude, you are failing in your English. You should do Swahili because, that would be an easy way. She's like, I have no clue how to write in Swahili. She's like, I speak it, I'm great, but I'm sure I will be worse at it in terms of like an exam than I
Yeah.
would be at IELTS. So I'm gonna attempt IELTS, which is the English test. And I found that so fascinating. But then I was like,
Wow.
yeah, my essay, like I can write Bemba, but sketchy Bemba.
Mm.
Give me Bemba in an exam. I'm sure like I'm not gonna make it.
No, it's very true, and it's quite fascinating because, like, even chatting about it now, like, I realize that my thoughts are in English. Like, I do
Mm,
think
mm.
in English. Like, I can speak my mother tongue, like,
Yeah.
speak it properly if I'm in that situation, and I can even think it through if I'm in the right context. But when I'm not, I find that because I'm overly in an English speaking
Yeah,
environment. That is how I'm processing my thoughts, and yeah, it puts you in a strange place. Like,
it
okay,
does, right? It does. It does. And then you get into these layers, which I guess is also the crux of it, is really, if you think about how you honor yourself and how you value yourself, there are layers of your culture and your language that are part of you and your value and your worth. So if you're thinking about like, oh, I need to be from the Queen's language and the Queen's place for me to be like a proper Western person, then anybody who's not that is here, right? Like
yeah,
we've just automatically reduced ourselves because our respect of the language is, this is a higher language than this language.
mm,
And the dynamics that then come into play. Um, but I really think about it more into the dynamics that come into play in yourself
yeah,
and how you then go like, yeah, I don't care, if my mother tongue is not English, I'm still great and I'm still an awesome person. I respect that this being is actually added to my elevation of worth, not
Mm,
my degradation of worth.
yeah, yeah. No, totally, completely agree with that. If you forget to value yourself, that you're
Mm,
still you,
yeah.
that I think that's where you miss the point. Like that's the that is when things start to go all
Yeah.
right, where you're sort of like now performing to raise up to that standard, right? As opposed to remembering that no, 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 it's fine, I'm still me. And I think like that's where you even get to a place where you start to accept your your limitations of getting to all those higher levels, like
Yes.
acknowledging that, oh, I do have an accent, and that is fine.
Yeah.
Um, and some people are not going to understand me. And when they don't understand me, I don't take it personally, but I do understand that they do struggle to, hear me correctly because, well, it's not my language.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that I can never remember what the actual like Trevor Noah has this in one of his old shows where he was talking about hate and how his mom would say if somebody sends you hate, you twirl it around and throw it back at them. um and I laugh at that joke so much because in the end I'm also kind of like ultimately everything about self-respect is also what you throw back
Yeah.
people. Like I'm not gonna take all the disrespect that you give me or what I think is disrespect. I'm not gonna take that and wear that. I'm just gonna be like, meh, nah, I have my own
Yeah.
kingness, queenness to keep, and whatever you want, you're giving me, I'm not taking it. Like just push it back out.
Mm. And in our cultures, these things, it was taken extremely seriously because
Mm,
you're always being reminded of who you are and what you're not,
yeah.
and it's being emphasized, no, you're this kind of person, you're not expected to be doing that, so
Mm,
don't do that. It's like
yeah.
even when you forget yourself, especially like your family, like in your case, like your grandmom would make sure that we're not going to allow you to degrade below
Yeah.
what you are, right?
Yeah, and I like that. It's like the wisdom of it as well as a people who are living together is reminding each other of
Mm,
these things as
mm,
well because life is life. It will bring us down, it will shake us around, and it's just like in those moments where the people are like, yeah, remember who you are, remember your worth, so that brings you up as well, brings somebody else up who's in the doldrums.
yeah, yeah, and you do need that, like especially life puts you in a corner. You you get blind to that.
Yeah.
You do forget your queenness, your kingness, and you get, like in Christianity they'll say the devil is a liar, so you fall for the lie
Yeah.
of what you're not.
If you're Nigerian,
And
you can do the hand over your head.
yeah, yeah. But then it's actually you need to have more confidence
Mm,
in your queerness and your kingness, and know that it will take you through, but only if you actually believe
yeah.
it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's what I think I like the most, that it's a reminder of it in yourself.
Mm,
Like before you see it in someone else, before somebody even acknowledges it for you, you need to acknowledge it yourself.
yeah,
Like once you acknowledge it yourself, then you can like, it just exudes in everything that you do.
yeah, because you make it real, right? It becomes a reality. It's
Yeah.
like it's kind of
Yeah.
like, oh no, no. And if you don't own it, then it sort of like starts to fade away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. May our kingness, queenness never fade.
That's a good way to wrap that one up. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.